Okay, my friends, today is a doozy. We are continuing our series on the economic collapse leading to the Great Depression in America. And of our six main causes of the Great Depression, today we are talking about the weak and unregulated banking institutions. There's a lot to cover in this video. I will try to be concise. The stock market crash and the banking industry collapse. So in 1929, October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed. Many investors in the early part of 1929 began to sell their stocks while they could still get a high price for them. As investors began withdrawing from the market, stock prices started to fall. And as stock prices fell, companies slowed down their production, which in turn led to additional price drops. By October of 1929, the stock prices were on a devastating downward spiral. On October 24th, investors flooded the market to sell in an attempt to get rid of their stocks. Stock prices plummeted, and investors started losing large amounts of money. A group of bankers, led by J.P. Morgan, attempted to stabilize the market by purchasing stocks at a higher price than the market was offering. While the bankers managed to pump some much-needed cash back into the market, they ultimately could not stop its continued descent. So on October 28th, Monday, investors again rushed to the stock exchange and sold their stocks at a loss of over $4 billion. On October 29th, now known as Black Tuesday, orders to sell at any price swamped the stock market. In a matter of hours, people lost fortunes it had taken an entire decade to make. First National Bank executive George Baker, who had once made $22 million on the stock market in one day, claimed he lost over $15 million as a result of Black Tuesday. One distraught president threw himself off the ledge of a New York hotel after his company's stock fell from $113 to just $4. By the end of Black Tuesday, investors had lost $16 billion. By October's end, the stock market was in ruins and the Great Depression had officially begun. Now, the stock market crash is going to affect everyone. There's a video coming next in this series which really ties this all together. I encourage you to watch it at the conclusion of this video. So the stock market crash triggered a collapse in the banking industry as well. The banking industry had grown increasingly unstable over the course of the 1920s, in part because of Republican policies related to laissez-faire and the bank's overextension of credit to stock market investors and brokers. The Republican presidential administration of the 1920s strongly favored economic and political laissez-faire. This means the founding principle is, right, leave alone. It's the belief that the government should not interfere or impose any regulations on commerce or businesses. As a result, many industries across the 20s, including the banking industry, were operating with very little or no government oversight. The Federal Reserve Board was in charge of regulating U.S. banks and protecting bank depositors, but its regulations were weak and inadequately enforced. That meant that these banks were able to do whatever they wanted to do in an effort to make money for themselves and for their employees. So here's what went down. The banks began to speculate depositors' money on high-risk ventures. What it means is that the banks were loaning money to the public. The public were taking those loans and they were buying products and they were buying stocks. Well, the money that they were buying those products and stocks with was actually the savings accounts of other members of the public. So when the stock market crashes and members of the public who had loans on those stocks can't pay it, it means that the bank is going to default on that loan, right? The bank will take a loss. But it's not really the bank's money, right? The bank had loaned out another member of the public's savings account. So when customer A, who bought the stock, can't pay back the loan, it means the bank can't pay back customer B, who had the savings account. There's no regulation on this in the 1920s because of this policy of laissez-faire. The government is not interfering or creating policies that will interfere in the bank's business. So the banks were free to operate as they wanted to. So when the market crashes, thousands of families, including families who had never invested in the stock market, lost everything. So I'm going to back up and try to explain this just a little bit more clearly. So during the speculation frenzy of the 1920s, banks permitted investors to buy stocks on large margins of credit. What it means is that investors with very little money to purchase large amounts of stock could pay like maybe 10 or 20% cash down on a stock, and then they would borrow the rest to pay for their stock purchases. For example, if an investor wanted to purchase $20,000 worth of stock, she typically had to put up 10% or $2,000 of her own money. She could then ask the bank to loan her the remaining 90% or $18,000. The bank would lend her the money with the expectation that if she could not repay the loan, the bank could seize her stock and sell the stock for instant cash. Like other Americans in the 1920s, bank officers were confident that stock prices would continue to rise. They believed that accepting stock as loan collateral was just as safe as accepting a house or any other form of personal property. The bankers could not envision a day when many stocks would not be worth the paper they were printed on. So when the market crashes in October 1929, it means that the banks are going to crash right behind it. First, families that had played the stock market lost all of their savings, depleting the bank's already small cash reserves. Second, investors who had bought stocks on margin either could not sell their stocks at all or were forced to sell them at a fraction of the price. As a result, they had little or no money with which to repay the bank that had given them the loan. The bank, in turn, could not replace its depositors' money, the savings account, which it had used to fund the loan. Therefore, even people who had not speculated in the stock market lost everything. Finally, as unemployment soared, an increasing number of people began defaulting on their mortgages and their other types of loans. As the Great Depression deepened, many banks had no assets, no cash reserves, and no new money coming in. Hundreds of banks immediately closed their doors after the stock market crashed. And by 1932, 1/4 of the nation's banks had closed, almost 6,000 banks. Please do watch the video that is up next on this playlist in order to see how everything here is related. It's a 5-minute history lesson of the Great Depression. Thanks for watching.